Wow, it's been forever. Okay, let's talk about some really interesting stuff. I feel like this is my most vulnerable share, and there's some bold claims I'm going to work with. So let's get started. This is on the topic of the Shiv Field cosmology, a phenomenological framework for consciousness, time, and reality, plus an unexpected epistemology. The topics covered, I'll run through them super quick. Where we left off in season one, with where I would like to potentially track thoughts and linking that to what's been going on with general relativity and quantum mechanics today. Yes, I believe there's a link. And battling the need for a theory of everything, scientific assumptions I'll be making to work on proving my case, dark consciousness lessons learned from my time in Romania, what's hidden in our existence that links us to the cosmos as consciousness, a deeper understanding of levels of extremity. I'll actually only briefly touch on this. This will be in the follow-up lecture. An unexpected but necessary approach to reality-based disorders. Tracking thoughts. Okay, let's be real. You guys are all witnessing not just lectures, but my research journey evolving in real time, plus my entrepreneurial endeavors. So expect a lot of accountability and I don't knows and shifts that I make on my end so I can maintain integrity. So, two lectures ago, I mentioned that perhaps continual decoherence may give mass to thoughts. The more we continue to think about them and give them attention, the more they develop like a sense of actually having tangibility, as in there, I just mentioned it, and it can be measured with properties like mass. But I would like to retract this statement for now to place into consideration how quantum entanglement can be applied to thoughts. And quantum entanglement basically states that there can be that instant connection between two particles, regardless of time, space, distance. This would imply that thoughts would be massless. Time is not a causal factor with thoughts, as connections can happen instantly mentally, and we will explore the ramifications and plausible consequences of this in future lectures. And I think there was at some point I threw around this idea of what if we could track a particle all the way from the beginning of the Big Bang down to how it enters our thoughts. So let's talk. What would a quanta of thought look like? Or more specifically, a quanta of consciousness. All right, I'm going to now introduce the Shiv particle and the Shiv field. This is not because everyone calls me Shiv. This literally has to do with the archetype of Shiva, which is cosmic consciousness. So here are the assumptions I'll be working with. Graviton, which is the quantum of gravity, is it's still waiting to be scientifically established, but here I'm going to be working with it as being true and letting you know that it's subject to change, of course. Panpsychism, that the entire cosmos is conscious, just beyond the way we only define it for human beings. And I'm going to start defining the shift particle as a hypothetical quantum unit of consciousness, massless, vibrational, non-electromagnetic, informational, subtle, analogous to the graviton, but specifically encoding self-aware perception. And the properties would be non-local, again, massless, only detectable via changes in awareness states, not physical detectors alone. And I really want to push for the fact that experience is data. Why aren't we treating it like it is? And it affects everybody. Subjectivity is just high dimensional objectivity that we have not yet learned how to read. And we can witness a lot of things going on in the world. And there's just so many waves. You know, we move in between pendulums, and it seems like I have empathy for people wanting to maybe perhaps hold on to a sense of like order, right? But what I end up seeing, unfortunately, is a way we like to tell people how to or to not live, and that something is absolutely wrong or absolutely right. And that's a disaster for me. And it's not something I support for my fellow human. You can't tell somebody else that what they're experiencing is crazy and that everything you believe is absolutely correct. Unless, you know, we don't want people to harm others or themselves. And there's nuance to that too, because people have different ideas of what harm is. But we need to be willing to move more towards not acceptance in the sense of you like everything, but in the sense of like there are infinite realities. So here we go with the Shiv field. So this is my name for the universal field of consciousness. This field exists as a layer underneath every particle we know, and it's where everything would arise from. And as a reminder, for me, the brain is a filter of this Shiv field, not a producer of consciousness itself standalone. This may indicate that all thoughts already exist in the Shiv field and they are shared amongst the collective. And the quantum excitation of that would be the Shiv particle. So, on talking about other particles as well, gravitons in particular, I'll be taking a look at um, what are they, how do they work, and they kind of came from a few different issues and paradoxes. So the first one being the black hole information paradox. Semi-classical gravity is valid on scales where gravitational and quantum effects are separate. But when there's, I think, data falling into, let's say, a black hole, quantum mechanics says it's unitary and you can get that data back and it's those quantum processes are reversible. But without quantizing gravity, you can't really make gravity and quantum theory talk to each other at black hole event horizons. And Hawking radiation is a theoretical phenomenon where black holes emit radiation due to quantum effects near the event horizon, eventually leading to their evaporation. So, Hawking radiation is only possible because the vacuum fluctuates quantum mechanically. And since we have an influence of gravity around there too, this suggests that gravity should have quantum fluctuations as well, hence gravitons. There is a cosmologist I admire these days. Her name is Claudia de Ram. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. She mentions how space and time and how they get realized is one of the biggest mysteries, and that standard tools to explain gravity today don't really make sense. So these gravitons would exist in gravitational waves. Her theory is that gravity's effects are finite and that gravity gives life to space-time. My speculative leap is that these shift particles arising from a field of consciousness are gravitationally sensitive, and they kind of would work together. Not via mass, but via informational curvature in a higher dimensional manifold. A mind that is an emotional contraction, so fear and scarcity, or expansion, which could look like bliss, surrender, love, changes the local topology of this manifold. And so the curvature we would see with space-time, where gravity kind of gives life to it, can be informed with working with the Shift field, which is why I am proposing there could be a shift particle graviton model, but here are the first draft and issues, just some thoughts that have been on my mind. I'm asking if we can link everything that's ever existed to a dual model of the graviton and shift particle combined. Where does this idea even come from? From the Shiv Shakti model of the cosmos. So remember, Shiv is pure awareness, observation, stillness. Shakti is that dynamic, energetic force of creation in the cosmos. Shiv and Shakti are named separately for conceptual purposes, but they are technically inseparable. So here's the issue with having a Shiv particle graviton model. If they're truly inseparable, how are you actually going to get 100% separation in a quanta of gravity and then one for consciousness? And here I would be suggesting that the graviton and the informational gravitational waves are more following the Shakti aspect of this model. So this would imply that when you search for a graviton, there would be some quanta of the Shiv particle involved and vice versa. Do we even want to approach this model? In a way, yes, but maybe not in the way we know how to measure today, because I do think that there can be some sort of value in seeing things happening in discrete packets of energy and at least giving more depth to what we know today about gravity and how things expand and contract within space time. Okay, so before, if you start naming fields and particles, right, you just don't want to be making things up because then anybody could do it. Let's take a look at what science has today for particles and their standard model, right? So the standard model of particle physics, the Higgs field, and the Higgs boson. Let's just start with the basics. Fermions are particles that make up all the matter in the universe. Bosons are force carriers or exchange particles. The standard model accounts for how these particles are able to interact with one another and gain mass. And I'm going to start listing some forces now. So the weak force is part of atomic structure we don't experience because the massive particles make this force just top off very quickly. It's responsible for beta decay, where a neutron transforms into a proton, an electron, and an antineutrino. The strong force is responsible for the cohesion of quarks within the protons and neutrons inside the nuclei of atoms, and the effects max out in the subatomic realm. And in quantum field theory, I found this kind of fascinating. There's a field for every fundamental particle. Particles get their mass from interacting with the Higgs field. The Higgs field is a fundamental scalar field which is responsible for giving mass to particles directly proportional to how much particles interact with this field. The Higgs boson is a quantum excitation of the Higgs field, which decays into other fundamental particles discovered through high energy particle collisions. And the graviton is a quanta of gravity, which carries the gravitational force that doesn't directly interact with the Higgs field and actually predates it. So here's some methodologies we use. Renormalization. It's a collection of techniques in quantum field theory that is used to treat infinities arising in calculated quantities by altering values of these quantities to compensate for their effects of self-interactions. So basically, there's a lot of big numbers or small numbers, negative numbers, numbers that just don't make sense, right? If there's particles interacting within this all these multiple fields. So we apply different techniques and change certain numbers to be able to make things make sense. I guess that would be one way to put it. And then we have the hierarchy problem where there is a vast discrepancy between expected and observed values of the Higgs boson mass and the cosmological constant. We will come back to that. Naturalness is a way to guide new theories and phenomena, which essentially state that systems should follow a unity order of unit measurement and shouldn't need any crazy coincidences or extreme fine-tuning of constants to make sense. Um, this is my favorite one, the strong anthropic principle. The universe must have properties allowing for intelligent observers, implying that consciousness isn't a side effect, but baked into cosmic structure. And if you remember one of the lectures I talked about how the the third spatial dimension serves as a potential ground for self-awareness. Not everything that's 3D is self-aware, but of course, like we are, so we have the potential in this dimension. So yes, but we do have another theory around gravity to take a look at, and it's Eric Verlinde, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, and his theory of emergent gravity. So he says that gravity is not a fundamental force, but rather emerges as an entropic force. And this takes away the need for dark energy, but also challenges the graviton approach. For me, when I heard about this, I immediately resonated with an informational entropic force being what carries out the gravitational force. However, I do still find value in being able to measure impact and effects, which is where quantum excitations could still hold validity. And of course, if there's a better way to go about measurement where you don't need a quanta of something, then I would be investigating that. But this is where I'm at today. If emergent gravity is more informational, then what helps provide the sense of coherence? Where is the information coming from? And how does that information inform the entropic movement? Which is still why I was coming up with this Shiv field. I also read something about like a UV ultraviolet theory and infrared theory, and just high energy and lower energy excitations and movements. And I feel free to debate me on this or share your perspective. It just felt like there were so many different fields and so many different styles of theories kind of collecting together. And I find that it is actually better if we can work with understanding physics by understanding that consciousness is the base of everything first. And I find that throughout this lecture, it will actually simplify a lot of things. And I feel that here, even with this emergent gravity approach, the Shiv field can still provide a consciousness-based interface for all gravitational and space-time interaction and informational coherence. And then once again, this shift particle can be the excitation. So coming back to this, we need to stop trying to pursue a theory of everything and instead, like I shared previously, track the same something that exists in everything, which would be consciousness, that pulsation. And how does Shiv interact with the standard model particles without violating conservation laws? This should have been Shiv particles, sorry. Based on what we went over, does the Shiv particle or the Shiv field make sense to exist within the framework of the standard model? Let's be honest, no. But as the standard model stands, it's not totally explaining everything like the interiority of things, the subjective experience, phenomenology, etc. The Shiv field does not seek to replace physics. That's really important, or the Higgs field, but to offer a deeper octave of science and have more depth where we can view where everything we know today can emerge from and work with current science, not against it, so that we can create a bridge between consciousness and cosmology. So we can try approaching measurement in a new way. We want to have a measurable effect that the shift field would consistently create. And we also need to accept that experience is something you can never perfectly duplicate. As long as you're looking for two things right next to each other, they're going to be slightly, like even if it's 0.0000001% difference, we can't be looking for replicability like we do in the traditional sense with the scientific method. We need to find a domain where its presence leaves a fingerprint. We need to repeat enough trials to see a non-random statistical anomaly and establish a resonance-based epistemology. Don't forget this, we're going to come back to this. Further refining of our Shiv field. Its non-local, coherence-sustaining information field acting as a substrate through which thoughts arise, subtle disturbances manifest, reality-based disorders reflect pattern breakdowns in the coherence of this field at different layers of embodiment, which we will also discuss. It may behave like an interference field where aberrations manifest when Shiv particles fall out of entangled synchrony. Another way I'm also thinking about this too is I've for a while had this intuitive feeling that perhaps there's like a deeper like grid, like a consciousness grid that kind of is baked into this Shiv field. And multiples of these particles, I don't know how they behave. I don't know their geometries and trajectories. I'm just sort of putting this together, but I do wonder if these particles can kind of like have some attractor basin of some sort and they can come together and make some sort of line, yeah? And these lines can be smooth and they can have distortions, which is where I'm suggesting that aberrations can manifest. And it precedes and pervades the standard model of particles. It shows up for human beings most directly in a subjective experience. And I really also want to come back to what I discussed with scientism and the words of Frederick Fagan about how can we explain more with less when discussing how can we explain consciousness with math and science when math and science are tools and consciousness created math and science. So I am not trying to explain consciousness with reductive tools. I left that like many lectures ago. But I want to use these tools, though, to inform us of the footprints that the shift field can leave and what the consciousness of field's effects are specifically for human beings within our mind-body consciousness architecture. And timescape cosmology versus dark energy. This part for me for the lecture moving forward is super exciting. The fact that all of this can actually be tied together as one thing is so fun. So, defining dark energy, the mysterious force driving the accelerating expansion of the universe, and often modeled with the cosmological constant. What is a cosmological constant? It's essential for modeling the accelerating expansion. It will have an objective impact when it comes to astrophysics research, but could it be that having a constant in itself is also a limitation? So nothing in the cosmos is ever really constant, right? We could maybe use this as a way to segue into how we move from purely the left side of the brain of thinking about this to not just left and right side, but of our whole architecture and all of the infinite input spots within this architecture that takes in human experimental data. Before I get into timescape cosmology, I do really want to touch on the fact that, like, the concept of a cosmological constant, I am not trying to defy scientists who put all the work and heart and soul into creating these beautiful equations and push for deeper research. It's just wanting to, it's not this or, it's both and. We can hold space for the fact that constants help for more physical research. And but if I am going to be consciousness focused, constants at that point indicate more of a human limitation. So just wanted to clarify that. Timescape cosmology. This actually challenges the lambda CDM model of cosmology by proposing that the observed acceleration of the universe, it's actually an illusion. It doesn't have anything to do with dark energy, but it's actually because there's different time experiences or rates of time, depending on whether there's a void or a wall. So it suggests that time passes slower in denser regions like galaxies and faster in voids. And because of these, the way time is accelerating or not, this is misinterpreted as acceleration of the universe. For me, intuitively, I am accepting this theory over the dark energy cosmological constant structure. You will, in a future lecture, see how I conceptualize this for reality-based disorders. Okay, so because I'm pulling from timescape cosmology, how can I use that to integrate with the Shiv field? So with timescape cosmology, time is not uniform throughout the cosmos. But when you pair non-uniformity from timescape cosmology with an informational coherence field based on consciousness, the Shiv field, what happens when you put the two together? So you can, before we talk about really complicated stuff, right? Like the universe is, it's speaking to you within your own mind, like a lot of it, which is why I say that the cosmos is within, but everything can be scaled up and scaled down, right? So you already have an idea of this. Does your consciousness not impact how you experience not just time, but even uniform time, let alone non-uniform situations, right? So 1 second can feel like a whole minute or longer when our mind, body, soul is in total presence mode. And this usually might happen during suffering or high cortisol events. The same unit of time of 1 second can feel so short when we're happy, without needing to engage all of our computational skills. And computational can, yes, come not just from the mind, but physical and spiritual existence, being into an experience when you're kind of just more sitting back and relaxing. So even if 1 second is the same for all clocks, experience of that second differs in direct proportion to coherence within the Shiv field. If the whole entire cosmos is conscious, this could explain potential voids or walls. Because if we want to link tantric philosophy's macro to micro approach, maybe in our own minds, we have our own timescape cosmology, just as the cosmos does. And when I say that the whole entire cosmos is conscious, it explains voids and walls because what I'm suggesting is directly pulling from, again, like how 1 second can feel like whether 1 minute, or how it can feel like it's extremely short. The reason I like timescape cosmology, and again, always subject to change, I do see a synchronicity or parallels rather with timescape cosmology's concepts and lokas or dimensions throughout the cosmos from Vedic sciences. And I would like to find a way to integrate and share with you how I feel the Shiv field can fit into this as well. So I've already spoken about the inversely proportional relationship between dimension, frequency, and density. So the higher the vibration of consciousness, the lower the density, and maybe the thinner the veil between imagination and actual reality. I've not experienced this myself, but just hearing some things online about people and their near-death experiences, or who they may speak to. And one thing stuck out to me of like how in heaven it's so great because when you think something, it just appears. And so maybe there really isn't like a boundary between imagination and physical reality because that's not really materialized, which makes things run very quickly. That's why the density is low. But when you're in heaven, right? The frequency of consciousness is like high. You're like either at or the closest to God consciousness, okay? So this could also indicate being earlier on in the universe where things hadn't calcified into form yet. This is a hot take from me. Okay, I didn't get this anywhere. This is just me thinking about stuff. So what if lokas from Vedic sciences and Hindu cosmology could also represent moments of time in the universe? And if they're all existing at once, this could also indicate how past, present, and future is all happening at once. The reason I say this is because in the lecture where I brought up how the Loka system probably works in actual scientific terms, um, if if I think about how the universe began and it starts at the Big Bang, but I propose more of an emergence dissolution model rather than like something just kind of popped. Um, well, in the early stages, I mean, I wasn't there with a camera, but I would assume that nothing like, quickly turned into matter quite yet. I mean, that took time. And so it did make me wonder, like, I find it fascinating. I really just do that there's lokas existing all at once. And with this inversely proportional relationship, I was talking about maybe the proverbial archetypal sense of heaven and hell. And hell would be the highest density, but the lowest consciousness frequency. Could this not also represent entropy when everything has already been created and done? There's nothing else to take form anymore, nothing else to transform either, and time moves perhaps extremely, extremely slowly. But like in the Swarga Loka, which is like the closest to heaven or at heaven, it moves very, very quickly. And so I think I was wanting to combine that concept with seeing that, the reason we experience an arrow of time, like linear time, is due to entropy. Yet I can't help but wonder if lokas, and as you go into the lower, excuse me, I mean, it's a lower realm, but higher density, if that is a form of entropy at play, and if so, and if they exist all at once, but yet entropy is how we experience an arrow of time, could there be a conflict with this? And could that also push for this idea that everything really is happening all at once rather than linearly? And even with timescape cosmology and time moving differently, and it's not organized. I haven't seen anything about organization with timescape cosmology with lokas, but I'm just saying like maybe there could be some parallels here, where time speeds up and slows down based on voids and walls. I have not, again, personally visited any of these places, but there's so much to keep reading about and learning. I do think that the parallels are fascinating, though, and I think that timescape cosmology begets maybe having a structure for dimensionality in this way. So, once again, can we say that we could have the same cosmic structure in our minds? So we also have high vibration, low vibration, creation frequency, the stale, like everything has been done frequencies, right? These vibrations and dimensions are within us. The cosmos are within us. And they're logged away, this data, in our subtle senses, our granthis. In Tantra, granthis just means psychic knots. And then our physical knots and our pains, our emotional states, our ranges of awareness, etc. Again, I am saying I'm bringing this up because we could have this same thing that we see in the cosmos in our own consciousness in our brain due to how our consciousness directly impacts how we experience time and how things can speed up and slow down just based purely on experience, even for uniform time. So, how can we begin to map this? Again, like if we want to think about everything up there, there's a point where it's kind of difficult. How much can you really do with your space travel? But maybe there's a way, and tantrics in the past did this. This is how they became aware, informed about everything out here. They explored everything in here. So, with ranges of awareness and subtle senses, how might we begin to map all of this data? Okay, the portal between cosmic consciousness and human consciousness. Um, for people maybe looking at this for the first time, in tantric philosophy, there is something called the Pancha Koshas model. And this basically is koshas means like layers and sheaths. Pancha means five. So if you take a look over here, you will see that all of these koshas end in the word Maya, and Maya is Sanskrit for illusion. So all of these layers are parts of you, and interestingly enough, all of these layers are still not you because we identify with them, yet they are an illusion. And I created a YouTube video that I will link in the description about how that the Vinyaya Maya, the wisdom sheath, could be the hidden root of all reality-based disorders. So really quickly going through it, the Annamaya from the very top is what we most closely align with our physical body, what people see. Then we have the Pranamaya, which is our breath, our life force layer. Manomaya, mentality, your thoughts. Excuse me. Vinyaya Maya is where the ego begins to dissolve, which is why I say it could be the root of all reality-based disorders. I really encourage you to check out the video for more of an in-depth look. And then the Anandamaya, the bliss body, even with that bliss, if that's still a form of Maya with that spiritual connection with your soul, your consciousness, but really what you are at the end is just a pulsation of awareness. That's it. And so I had a little chart I try to make out there. And I would like to point out that from the Annamaya to the Manomaya, it's the mind-body structure. But once you start going from Vinyaya Maya to Ananda Maya, all the way here, you will need the mind, body, and consciousness. That's something that you can't really ignore. And I had sort of touched on how a normal life path, well, I know what does normal really mean, but maybe you have a definition for your own self since I shouldn't define it for you anyways. Um, so you have an idea of what a suffering path looks like and what a normal path may look like. And this chart was to kind of demonstrate the path towards getting to the bliss body state and that deep enlightenment connection of happiness and joy. And Vinyaya Maya, I was saying, has so much resistance, which is why there's a shared bottleneck because the mind is going to do what it needs to do, which is protect your identity. And as you start releasing that, the mind is fighting actively. It's really difficult. It feels like it could be the root between the battle between the mind slash ego and the soul. We do not have the tools in Western science to equip people with this. So when people go through things, we just give them a pill or tell them it's all in their head. There's more than just what's going on in your head that's happening. And I'm sure for anyone who has suffered from something like schizophrenia will understand the depths this goes to. I do not use ChatGPT, by the way, to do my work. I just use it to make charts. I just want that to be very clear. I'm very against using ChatGPT. I like to think for myself when it comes to things like this. So I'm saying this because this chart is obviously formatted in that way. But like kind of giving a better visual of where cosmic consciousness and human consciousness could either be at odds or they can maybe work together. Ideally, we want them to work together. And there are different metrics and fields we can use for each of the koshas, starting from the outermost Annamaya all the way down to the Anandamaya. And this is where it gets kind of finicky with tracking. And we're going to touch on this a little bit more in detail. So when we want to experiment with moving through the koshas, we would need to identify what the vibratory boundaries are for each, as in how do we know we've hit the, I mean, pranamaya to manomaya? How do we know we went from manomaya to vinyayamaya? When you're meditating, aren't you sort of thinking still? How can you go from just thinking to like now dissolving your ego? That can be kind of tough. And it can look different for each individual, which is why they call it the hard problem of consciousness. And we would likely need people to do their own internal body scanning, which also requires people to know themselves extremely well. And this might call for a requirement where you actually don't have a witness to this because maybe an additional observer adds more noise to the data. They could maybe influence the person doing their internal scanning. Um, and also, I experience this as well with like anything where I meditate or something I'm intuiting. It's really difficult to know whether things are made up in your imagination versus like what's actually happening. And then you have to keep asking yourself, what's the difference, you know? But of course, like you can overdo it, and there's some things where you're like, obviously, I'm making this up. And literally trying to experiment now, would we need to compare the states with multi-electrode arrays? Because before, I think it was my most recent one, when I was bringing up how I would be shifting the way I approach things, it's it's because for this one in particular, I mentioned looking at EEGs, but EEGs are displaying some data as your brainwave states are being tracked, and like you see information after the fact more so, and that's where it's more valuable, I would say, for analysis. But I feel that if we want to experiment with moving through something like Goshas, we would need something a bit more invasive and real time, and not just how like a cluster of neurons behave, but like individual ones perhaps, so we can have as much data as possible. Um, Now, the other thing to note too, remember I had shown in the, oh, I have to go all the way back. It's okay. Well, yeah, we're going all the way, this part here can be trackable from the mind and the body. This graphic also says so over here. You're fine up until this point, but it gets pretty kind of crazy when the ego dissolves. In esoteric Eastern philosophy, we link ego to the mind. And in Western science, when we're talking about the mind, we kind of like use it interchangeably with the brain. So if you're going beyond the mind, if you're going towards Vinyaya Maya, where the ego begins to dissolve and you're going beyond the mind, would neuroinvasive techniques then become a waste of time? There's really no way to know unless I try to find out. And this is why I came back to tracking a quanta of consciousness, not just from thoughts that are like intrusive or when people suffer from OCD, just really violent things that can happen for people in their minds, but also knowing that all parts of the cosmos and our bodies would have Shiv particles. If we're saying that everything in the cosmos is based off of panpsychism and it's conscious, then they have their own version of Shiv particles and how it would show up. There could be, I don't know, there's a potential for decay. And that's where I feel like this ontological framework is almost, and I hate to use the term metaphysical because I don't want it to lose a sense of legitimacy since everyone's experiencing it. Everyone watching this video right now has consciousness. So it's important to acknowledge that. But I think we do need to start giving a lot more attention to how there has to be something that we're likely not seeing and we definitely keep ignoring because we have a broken consciousness problem in this world and a lot of mental health issues in society. The issue also is when you're tracking things in the koshas, I mean, in my mind, because I'm thinking of that graphic of layers, like it's not going to be literal layers. That's a conceptual thing. It's going to be an experience. And immediately I think of, checking within the brain. How would I empirically separate altered consciousness states due to shift particles versus just this is like neural dysfunction? That's also very difficult and very nuanced. So, in all of this experimentation and thinking about how it would all work, I'm going all over the place. And there's a but, a big but. Something was missing. And it sounds really cool and scientific, but what's the glue that can hold these concepts together? And I mean, even with the Shiv field, it still feels kind of incomplete. Like they have particles, are there Shiv waves? How's that exactly working? How do we push forward for a new frontier of consciousness in a way that makes sense, it resonates, and it unites the cosmos with the intended harmony? Because, and I say this with so much love, we are really just looking for harmony and peace even if I strongly disagree with somebody else, and I'm sure they would strongly disagree with me too, that person in their mind genuinely believes they are searching for some type of peace with whatever actions they're working towards or working with. They're getting some sort of high, some sort of dopamine off of being who they are as a person. And the way we go about it is so ego-led. And it doesn't mean, oh, I'm the best. It means going from a place of more so coming from fear, reward punishment cycles, a sense of obedience, a sense of eternal chasing, a sense of externalizing, any sense of peace or self-concept, which creates a lot of issues. But that's the way some people will choose to go about it. And even if it leaves them in suffering, I mean, suffering is subjective, but they, in their minds, are still trying to get back home and be one with the cosmos. That is, if you think about everything that you do that really excites you and makes you happy, it's a deeper connection with the cosmos every time. And it's great because the feeling is there, but not the structure, not the deeper framework of understanding. So whatever would we do? Well, since season two is about dark consciousness, after all, and the universe really seems to have a sense of humor with me in particular, we'll talk about my experience in Romania, which is one of the darkest, ghoulish, and comedically worst times of my life, but also the exact experience that answered what I was searching for because I was just denying the truth. A very dramatic background, I know. Let's take a look. This is a photo I took. I was visiting one of Vlad Tepes's like torture dungeon places. He's got plenty of those. Um, but yeah, Romania, volunteer experience gone wrong. Let's get into it, shall we? I went to be a chef in a meditation retreat center. And I did this because my apartment lease was up and I wanted a method to continue doing this work for you guys. Honestly, I've devoted my whole existence to this at this point. And I was like, well, I'm getting more and more broke, but I want to be able to have housing in a way where I can like give an exchange of skills that I feel that I do my best at. And since you have to cook every day, I was like, easy, duh. Yeah, not only did I not get to be a true chef, there was a whole like almond mom, Kourtney Kardashian, like so many rules. It's like, one protein a day, but it's like egg or tofu because it was like vegetarian. Even outside of like the retreat meditation times, it's no dinner really. It's only a breakfast and a lunch. And a lot of really specific rules, but the entire experience on spirituality was spiritual bypassing and saying that trauma is not real. I really want to touch on this spiritual bypassing piece because it makes me livid, honestly. Uh, Groups of people tend to jump towards the end always and say, all you are is awareness. Um, they were saying out there that if you get into a car accident and you have trauma from that, it's because you asked for it. Like at some point you were like, oh my God, my life sucks, whatever. And this is where that hyper policing also comes into play, which was really big in this experience too. Like you have to be very particular about how you word things about yourself and like blah, blah, blah. Man, I mean, it's such a fear-based mindset. If this was really the case, and I know that you can continuously give value to thoughts to a point where it does impact who you are. I know that that can be a fact of life. All I'm also saying is, listen, I've spent many years of my life having some pretty bad self-talk, and I feel like I live the best life ever now, right? I think the best is being authentically you. When you're being authentically you, that is the highest form of self-love. And love shows up in multiple forms. It can be authentic, and then it can also be like, okay, now that we're being authentic, let's hold ourselves accountable, right? I even went as far as bringing up, even from my childhood. trigger warning, sexual trauma from ages 3 to 9. And because the host was bringing up how we all make wishes for bad things to happen to us, I was like, can you tell me what wishes I was making from ages 0 to 3? And he was like, well, you probably didn't know what was going on at the time, and you were, it's part of your culture's tradition, and blah, blah, blah. And like everyone just kind of like brushed it off really quickly. And I was like really shocked. I found it fascinating too, because people would just believe anything he said. It's kind of genius, honestly. And it really started confirming my belief, like, wow, this time in society is probably the best time ever. If you ever wanted to start a cult, do it now. I was mind blown by how, like, I really want to say too that, like, if a place does not make you feel safe and does not believe your pain, you don't need to be there. Like, at the end, we all know we're awareness. At the end, we all know everything is going to be okay. But we can't just make people jump to that conclusion. And when we are not acknowledging the way pain shows up in the body, like if you're saying trauma is not real, are you going to tell a war veteran that? A child in Gaza that? Are you serious? You know? And look, I don't want to have a debate about how whether COVID never happened. I know some people have their own theories about it, right? What I am saying though is like you cannot be speaking about things, claims that are either completely not falsifiable or very difficult to falsify, and then people just believe it, you know? I think he was saying something about how Vladimir Putin put a stop to it. I don't get it. Um, extreme heteronormativity, regardless of, because we're focused on non-dualism here, I am aware that people will have all different types of mindsets, and I am somebody who believes that people should live in a way that makes them feel most authentic to themselves. And saying something like, okay, it has to be absolutely this way because real love only shows up between these two archetypes of people, and then with these two, it's just purely lust. This is why I want to go back to like my initial uh first or second slide where I was saying experience is data. You can't just speak in absolutes and say that no, because of these rules and for these reasons, you are this or you are wrong. Like, is their experience wrong to you? You just feel like you know others better. And then disrespectful dismissal of viewpoints, a lot of misogyny, oh my goodness. And indentured servitude in the beginning. Eventually it got hashed out due to like setting some really strong boundaries, but it was pretty bad. And the actual country itself, like if you're from Romania, I do not mean to give any disrespect or insult. I'm talking about observations in some of like the historical tours and just my experience being a woman as well. And non-dualism comes in here too, because I had brought up like, how we have extreme attachment towards identity politics. And now here I'm talking about heteronormativity, being a woman, that kind of stuff. And so, lest we forget, we are human beings and we all want to feel safe and we all want to feel free in our own ways. And we should all be respectful of one another. And that is definitely not my experience that I had, unfortunately. There's a lot of darkness, which is always darkness has a lot of data. But yeah, Vlad Tepes's history was pretty brutal. And I chose this experience because it was supposed to be high vibe, I guess, and it had everything that I would ever really want to do, and it felt like the perfect opportunity. And everything that I thought I would be able to get was completely the opposite. I would have never consciously chosen this experience, but there's some things when you research doesn't just have to look like being on your computer or learning from a book, because yes, that person put a lot of work into writing their book. Scientists put a lot of work into working on their equations. And at the same time, not everybody knows everything. And it's really important to be informed on what's already out there and also value your own experience as data, which I was being shown to do. I definitely feel that Romania is an immersive historical art museum. Um, and this hurts my ego, but let's go for it. What's interesting that I've observed is that the cosmos responded the exact same way with the exact same magic to my host in the exact same way they respond to me. And I just was like, I've had my qualms with this person. I've been very open with him about it. So I just was confused and I was sitting there thinking, well, maybe the highest self alignment and frequency is what the cosmos will reflect back to you. And it will feel like magic to you. It's almost like an amplifying force. So I guess the cosmos don't really care about your belief systems, because a lot of those are human made, right? The cosmos predate all of this. And reality matching takes place for the cosmos for their infinite creations because reality and consciousness, etc., itself is infinite. Then, technically speaking, and I will say, to give the host credit, he brought up that, like, in spite of all of his viewpoints and mindsets and everything he had shared, that everybody should live as they wish and live as authentically as possible and take what feels good and leave what doesn't. And so, technically, even if he was telling people they should be a villain, like someone who could fight against him, he would support that if that meant you were your highest self. So if if someone's highest self was being a villain in the world, and I am very aware of how this sounds. The cosmos align with that because you can just take a look at our world today and how we're following the entropy of consciousness being at an all-time high. But I'm noticing a lot of, conscious creators coming in response and wanting to shift the paradigm and bring harmony to the world. When I say this, I don't support inhumane acts at all. All I'm saying is I'm just coming at it from a non-dualistic perspective because I don't believe in treating people in an inhumane way. And ultimately, harmony in the cosmos wins. I said I had an emergency and I had to leave early. I was going to be there for a much longer time, but I'm going to withhold some stuff that was personal that happened that was really dark for me. And it started going into the reality-based disorder realm, and it was just it was horrific for me. Yeah. But I thought, at the very end, that the silent retreat to participate in would be something that would be my saving grace. But no, it was actually a torture boot camp. It started at 5 a.m., ended at 9 p.m. So it was like 10 hours of meditation, no eye contact, no devices, no reading, no writing. We did get pretty decent food. If anyone's ever done Vipassana, I have not, but it seemed pretty similar to that. We were in basically like a greenhouse. It was so hot that week in Romania too. And just like I'm shaking in pain, and it feels like multiple knives are stabbing me in the back. And I would like to take a quick moment to say too that a month before I headed out for Romania, I had actually gotten an Akashic record reading done, and it's all recorded on Google Meet video. And basically, a lot of the guidance provided was to align with the heart constantly. And I visibly, you can watch me in the video being very resistant to it and being like, oh, okay. Um, because I want to kind of come to you guys in a scientific sense. So, anyway. I had never been through so much physical torture before in my life. And I kept, you know, hearing that in this reading that like I had to come into furthering my expansion with love and with the heart. And I was like, what the hell does that mean, right? Like, this is not realistic. On day 4 of the silent retreat, I had gone through the most pain at that point, and I was maintaining really proper discipline, and I was losing my mind. I wanted to scream. It was very difficult, very hot. I don't do well in the heat. And we started doing things with the heart in our meditation and also the chakra systems and all that stuff. And it's just something I wanted to try out. And that is when I actually started seeing the same fractals in sacred geometry you would see with shrooms and LSD is, I kid you not, something I started seeing while I was sober. So when we go to the place of the heart, that's when it finally hit me. Why was there a bait and switch from the universe to be brought over here? Um, in that piece, I was losing my ability to stand up straight, and I was again shaking from so much pain. And I had been sobbing. I spent most of my day sobbing. I never had a single good day in Romania. Sorry. Maybe there could be around two, probably not. But this is what happened. in my heart. This is my pretty vulnerable share, but here it goes. This is everything that came up for me in that meditation. I when your eyes are closed for that long, man, and you're just quiet and you're just in a place where you know no one and there's no eye contact, you will start seeing things. My heart had a visual of an explosion of this gold light, and all of these characters came out that were from my heart. And one of the things in the Akashic record reading was the way I would help people with reality-based disorders and dark consciousness is talking about where I turn to for self-medicine when the darkness is at an all-time high, which is what I was experiencing out there. So I turned towards my heart too. And I had to admit that. And I sobbed and wept and surrendered. And I said, okay, fine. Like I will admit it. Like I need the heart and I need to bring that to people too. So for me, my life has sort of always followed Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron. It's a beautiful movie. And the Teen Titans in particular, every time like a piece of my back was falling down in my mind, it was Raven who was like pushing me up in the pain point, and she was like massaging me. She's like, I'm not letting you fall down. And on the other side, there was Robin. And then there's a whole element of being careful what you wish for because I was in love with Naruto growing up. And he was doing this ninja warrior training that was that discipline, pain, suffering style, which is exactly what I got. I just, I didn't know I'd be getting into it. And then I was thinking of that scene from Interstellar about how love is something that goes beyond time and space, and maybe that's what the cosmos are all about. Um, Big Yu-Gi-Oh fan. I love the alter ego thing. I definitely have one myself. Kim Possible saying that I can do anything, and she's there to figure out what the sitch is. And even Jim from Treasure Planet asking me what I can do to make my life my treasure planet here on Earth. And there's like a big scene in the beginning where he opens his little orb and like the whole world shows up like this grid and he's able to like manipulate it. This TV show Witch, where like the main character her power is the heart. Um, and all of this kind of stuff, right? So basically, I'm just sharing my whole entire heart. The soundtrack for Spirit in particular, this was the number one because when I started leaning back and falling down, I could almost perfectly, it felt like this horse was really touching me, but his head, like if this is my back, his head was trying to keep me up and he was just making like the sound like I've got your back. So anyway, this is when I was like, okay, I can't go back now because these retreats, silent retreats that are so intensive, they're meant to show you a deeper message of something that the cosmos want to tell you through your own soul. You just need to be tuned in enough to listen. It was finally time to make the switch from being scientifically led and heart backed to now being heart led and scientifically backed. So now let's revisit everything with my newfound truth, love. When we revisit the Panchakoshas. So yes, we have from Annamaya to Manomaya being trackable in the body. Vinyayamaya is partly trackable but transitions into untrackable states. When we think about Anandamaya, it's non-local. You can't explain it in words, but it is a felt sense of love and being. It's actually a sense of love and unity with the cosmos. And this makes the Vinyaya Maya the threshold layer between the measurable self, the ego brain identity, and the unmeasurable self, the cosmic mind, formless awareness, and pure love. Science, math, computer science, engineering, all these beautiful STEM topics revisited. I had a lot of panic about creating this lecture. I'm having it right now as I speak because how it would be received and how my identity would be linked to the type of work I do and how people will dismiss what I'm saying. If I only talk in terms of, technical things like science and math and use big words, oh, it's great. I'm okay. I'm a genius, I guess. But if I bring up deep cosmic truths and they sound like the word love, do I lose all of you? Why are you here? What do you feel when I share what I share? You know? I had to realize it didn't matter, mostly because of all of that pain and suffering. Because pursuit of the truth requires the removal of the ego. And that was always meant to be my path. And maybe this helps other people to hear as well. Anyways, let's continue with defining what science and math is. Science is a systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical, natural world through observation, experimentation, and testing of theories against evidence obtained. Math is a field of study that discovers and organizes methods, theories, and theorems that are developed and proved for the needs of empirical sciences and mathematics itself. Could we not argue that when we are pursuing deeper truths and we're going at it in multiple modalities, even if they may seem abnormal, in hopes to get to this point? I did the silent retreat really for you guys. I wanted to get into something that maybe was not clicking so I could share and really help and really inform myself. And I had to put my fear to the side. But are we not doing science and math now? Even if we use the word love, especially with the next slide that's coming up. Science and math don't have to just look one way. It doesn't have to look like you're in a classroom all the time. It doesn't have to look like, I don't know, having medals or competitions. It's a study of our world and loving it so deeply and madly enough to want to learn more about it, observe it, experiment with it, get a taste of it, really connect with it. So I still believe I'm doing science and math. I've been told by newer friends that I have a scientific explanation for many things they may have going on with reality. And I was like, wow, they think I'm scientific, but really I feel like a romantic when you're on a date and you're asking, like, how are you? What's your, oh, favorite color is not good. But just, deeper things. And you're trying to get to know the person. Well, this is me. I'm on a date every single second, every day of my life when I'm doing this. And also when I'm talking to you guys, right? I'm feeling that connection. So this is why I'll never be comfortable being a spiritual leader because I'm here to just be a guide. That's it, not to tell you what to do. I never want to do that. You deserve to know that for yourself. It's your birthright. And I want to intimately connect people with their cosmic realities. And intimacy looks like being scientific. Otherwise, if I just tell you things at the end result and like give you guys major big claims and be like, oh, yeah, just believe it, well, you didn't connect with it. You didn't resonate. That resonance is love that you feel. And that resonance comes from being scientific. So they're kind of, in my mind, one and the same. So I get it too, because there's a lot of people out there that will take advantage of certain terms for their own gain, especially when you're very vulnerable, and I am not okay with that. Let's revisit the Shiv field now with love. So the Shiv field, once again, is the substratum of potentiality and consciousness, a vibratory field that gives rise to all form and experience. Love now here would be a scalar value indicating the degree of resonance or coherence within a subregion of the field. When you think of the word love, what comes to mind? I'm gonna guess it's something romantic, maybe something cheesy and corny, or maybe it's not. I was projecting those words. I apologize. But you probably will think of something kind of romantic and it's very human in form and it looks only one way. But love can also look like boundaries, where love protects the integrity of a system. It can look like death or loss, where there's love restructuring toward a higher equilibrium. This doesn't mean that loss is something that you should just feel okay about, okay? Silence, love withholding form to allow emergence. Love can look like irritation, love pressing against stagnation to catalyze motion, which is what happened to me in this retreat. My hypothesis is that love shows up as a corrective force in the Shiv field. Love can reestablish coherence when there's disintegration, connection where there is separation, and maybe, just maybe, connection to true Shivoham. Shivoham just means I am Shiva. Shiva just means that quantum coherence of cosmic consciousness, right? So, connection to that for those who struggle with reality-based disorders. Again, when I was talking about those aberrations of consciousness, those distortions, what if it's love that's that corrective force that can smooth out those lines and help us connect more and like smoothly transition from the ego and the mind to our soul, pure conscious, self-illuminating awareness. And I'm saying this especially because I want to track and focus in the Vinyaya Maya, which is where the ego dissolves. So brought this up already, but we could really help people out with this if we can just all put our egos to the side and like really try to deliver results, you don't have to believe anything I've said. It's just keep experimenting and do trial and error until you can see people really evolve and really heal and get back to who they are. I would also like to point out that I'm a human being just like you. And yes, it crushes me too to think about the fact that the worst people in the world need the most love. I don't like it. But it depends on how we define love, of course, and how it can show up. So just know that I'm learning with you and I'm just sharing with you as I go. So, what's next? Now, the real work finally can begin. Finally! We just needed to finalize a foundation of how things are likely operating. Mind you, as a true scientist and spiritualist, I work to evolve and continue learning with integrity and accountability. I love saying, I don't know. I'm so excited I could explode. I have never been this happy before in my life. This is so true. I am back in the States. But before I began this journey, everything I felt like was true happiness was kind of an illusion. This is the place to be. Now we can finally start adding some cosmic structure behind reality-based disorders. It doesn't have to just be something we just ignore and push to the side, and we can really help people with this. So I will have to build out Shivoham Labs kind of in a twofold manner because I want to do R&D. Just doing lectures like this is fun, even if everything went to shit with everything I was saying. Um, and I nothing was true, then we know things that cannot be true, and that's still a form of progress. Anyway, then with the R&D, there has to be a way we apply it as well as a business, and I need to make money at some point through an actual center where I can experiment because I just worry about being affiliated with the university and how you get funding for things like this. But there's probably a way, and I will have to spend a lot of time thinking on what the experimental apparatus looks like in the structure, but I can do it through like some type of center, and I have some ideas of what that would look like. But the point is to just deliver results. The follow-up lecture will come sooner. I'm so sorry. I know it's been a long time. But I was locked in, I promise. It'll come sooner because I've drafted a good chunk of the ideas already. So stay tuned, my loves. Thank you so much for listening to this lecture. I hope you have a wonderful evening. And yeah, I will see you in the next one.